G'day guys, and welcome back to my channel. Sorry I haven't posted in a week or two. Life has a way of distracting me, and it's been doing a damn good job past couple of weeks. Nonetheless, I'm sure everyone's fine with it. Let's get into today's video. And today we are going to be discussing the medieval period, mainly around England and France. And perhaps in the future we'll venture east of these locations. But for today, we're just going to stick with the Middle Ages in Britain. So of late, we've been realizing a lot of facts we are taught on the topic of the old world are quite ridiculous and obviously lies. And I believe the real question we need to ask ourselves is, what part did the medieval era play when it comes to the topic of Tartaria? I have my own theories, as I'm sure we all do, and perhaps I'll share them one day once I'm confident enough to talk about them. Until then, there is so many questions we need answered to do with history. So it's one lie at a time. Now, one of the most fascinating effects the medieval period had on the land and culture were castles. And when we look at the sheer grandeur of these structures, perhaps once upon a time admiring these buildings with the knowledge we've been programmed with and to believe, but with a fresh set of eyes attached firmly to our discernment filter nowadays, we see a different civilization's artistic skill expressed in unconventional architecture, for the time period anyway. So when you're researching the medieval era, and for the first time like myself, in an in-depth fashion, I guess, I've glazed over it in the past, but more so now looking for different types of red flags. And much like the 19th century in the World's Fair narrative, the medieval ages has their own architect messiah. As prior to William the Conqueror, William of Normandy, or William the Bastard, whichever you'd like to call him, prior to him conquering England in 1066, the Anglo-Saxons were inhabiting this land from the 5th century. So a culture a little bit inferior to the French who are conquering them, invading them. More of a simplistic community sort of taxation, etc. So not animals in any sense of the term, but not castle builders is sort of what I'm getting at. These people were more earthworks and earth mound architects, just sort of fancy retaining walls, really. They're called burrs, I think that's how you pronounce it. Burg, and this is what I'm talking about. So that's a man-made dugout, and they'd build the castle structure up here or over this mound, and this was their defense mechanism. And then William came along in 1066. He pretty much left the shores of France and, accompanied by, they say, 1,300 men, 1,000 infantry and 300 knights. And I'm pretty sure the official narrative says that he shipped the horses over too. So God knows how many horses you'd be shipping over, and especially seeming as the day he landed in England, he instantly started building castles, and I'm talking that day. I believe it's called Peveny Castle. was quickly constructed that day within the coming weeks, and another castle within 2 weeks. He had 2 castles constructed. Now they do say in wood, but later come back and they were reinforced in stone. Let's take a closer look at a couple of these castles. So William was pretty much the pioneer of castle building in England, landing there in 1066. By 1088, he had built. Well, let's firstly say there was only around 12 castles in all of England, Wales, and Ireland combined, and by 1088 there was over 100. So regardless of the fact that he built 1 in 2 weeks out of wood before the Battle of Hastings, where he then killed King Harold, people don't question that. People are so intrigued by the fairy tale story that, I don't know the story off the top of my head, but there's the castle I was talking about. Now, to me, I don't think he built it at all, because the base is not similar to his style, and that's probably because it's a Roman castle or structure. And, the Romans and whoever spoke Latin in early periods do have some sort of connection to a Tartarian history, I believe, but the Romans, I believe, built this, and again, William's inherited it, and probably because maybe the English haven't even seen it yet. They're not interested in it. It's probably ruins, and every reset, it's a new learning curve for the people venturing out. Apart from the lords, who have inherited great properties, land, and structures on there that they've claimed for themselves, and then named after themselves. And this is why that's so important to have land in your family, as the old saying would say, is you're from land, because the people that do own the land just claimed it first. That's all it is. Their name goes on the building, they write the laws, they dish out the tax laws, and that's all they are. Just the first inheritors does not make them nobility, is where I'm getting at. Yet people are so intrigued by the royal families' fairy tale stories that they lose track of how did they build these in 1066 in the 11th century. And why do we just assume that one man who is just a rich boy had an influence over a culture of Anglo-Saxons in England to build castles? It just doesn't make sense to me. It used to, I agree. And something that I believe that a culture like us would construct. But it seems that there was many different advanced civilizations in different periods of time. And you can see down here is a different brickwork to the top, probably damaged. Let's take a look at a few more castles. Only for us to come back and restructure it in the 19th, 20th century. And here you can sort of, what's going on with the water there? They would say they hung everyone out the front and then persisted to catapult and destroy the castle. And it's like, we are going by a story that the people that were victorious tell. And it's not always the story that I care about. I want the truth. How do we know that these inheritors didn't just take and then rename? This is Bodiam Castle, very cool. And one of those stories that, needless to say, you can see a whole lot of text here, and even a lot on the construction we'll get into in a sec. It's all gibberish. I mean, unless you're related to the Dallengrig or the Lennork, I think it is, family, you wouldn't care, and you wouldn't think anything twice of it, but it's the same old story. A knight sent from England, sent from a certain king, former knight of Edward, sent him into the countryside and said, build a castle, so he did. But where is he getting all the resources? Where is he getting the architectural skill? How is he getting the manpower? It's just, it will tell you more about what they had for breakfast than actual details of logistics and resource management. And this doesn't even look like the same castle. Here's today, which sort of looks like something from Disneyland. And just between you and me, I believe every Disneyland site is some sort of World's Fair or Tartarian city. Honestly, think about it. And this looks like a different keep, doesn't it? But they're claiming, I can sort of see it goes further back, but maybe this artist was making up for it. Now, this is how I assume that we would have first found Tartarian cities, like in North America. This is what I believe they would have looked like, just covered in shrubbery and water surrounding. And you have to wonder how this structure does not sink further into the sludge. The foundation of a structure like this must come out maybe 20, 30 feet, meters surrounding it, because the whole point of a foundation is so that this, in the great scheme of things, a castle is just one big heavy object wanting gravity pushing it downwards. So you'd need a bigger base. And how did they build that base for this sort of a structure? In the 13th century, I believe. You have to wonder, how did they... during the day, these people are ploughing the land with oxen and chipping away at stone, which we'll take a look at what I'm talking about in a castle being made currently today using in modern day using 13th century technique. So let's have a look at that. Here in Guédelon Castle now in France, and this is a 13th century castle that they're constructing using 13th century method. So you can see the hammer going at it. So these guys have been at this since 1997, wanting to reconstruct a 13th century community, really. And just look at the manpower it takes for one block. This goes on, and you got to remember, putting up 100 castles in 20 years. This has taken them since 1997, and people will debate that the Anglo-Saxons were helping them, and because that's the manpower. A lot of people forget that the French nobility did not want to bring their men or themselves to England in that period, as it was not peaceful. Not like France was under the rule of the crown. England was still quite rogue, and civil war and unrest was all over, considering foreign invaders constantly barracking for their throne. I don't blame them. But nonetheless, you got to think, how did he convince these people that lived in towns like this to build such extravagant castles? They've got no skill. They haven't got the resources for it. They've never had an interest in it prior. And I think it's pretty funny when you see them using modern day hammers, and it's taken them over 20 years and they're just not making much progress. So to believe the official narrative regarding castle structure, yeah, there would be more people constructing it, but these towns and communities had a max population of maybe 3,000 max, spread out over a massive area. So it's a little bit far-fetched if you ask me. Nonetheless, I'm going to keep looking into it. If you guys find anything pretty cool regarding medieval period, I did find some facts interesting that, all these castles that we're looking at, built by William, he shipped over white stone from Normandy called Normandy or Kent stone or Caen stone, not from Kent. They must have called it Kent stone in England perhaps, but it was definitely said to have been shipped from Normandy. So a massive task in the 12th century. So thanks for joining me for today, guys. My name's Phil, and this is Tartarian Zephyr. Hope everyone has a nice rest of your day or evening, and I'll see you on the next video. Catch ya.